I made about $510,000 from working with renters. I got strategies now where I'm doing 0 showings. I can get a renter client on a Monday. I could have that deal under contract and closed 24 hours later.
What does typical look like?
2 hours per client, per rental deal that I'm doing, $2,000 average commission. That's how I was closing 20 to 30 deals a month. After 1 year in the business, you don't have to spend $1 in ad spend, marketing, nothing. Here's the crazy part, right?
Thank you for joining me. I look forward to this conversation because you have one of the more unique businesses I've ever seen in real estate, period. And I've been in the business for 23 years, and you've made a whole business of supporting renters, and actually made our number 2, I think 2 years ago, as the solo producer. And I mean, $500,000-$600,000 in gross commission. I know the numbers because I track numbers, and I've never seen anyone do that. But before we start there, let's go back to how you ended up in this business.
Yeah, Leo, thank you for having me on here. I'll tell you, back in 2019, before I got my real estate license, I was lost. I didn't have a clue what I was doing in life. I was, burning through all of my savings. I was jumping from job to job. And one of my buddies said, why don't you get your real estate license? Another buddy ended up telling me that it was a terrible idea. There's, 200,000 realtors in Florida. That's where I'm from, obviously South Florida. And he was like, you're not going to sell any real estate. You don't know what you're doing, and you're competing against these experts. That's when I was like, well, let me prove you wrong. So that didn't end up happening, though, in the beginning. I got my license. I tried to work with the buyers and sellers. Probably first 2 months of my real estate career, it was focused on buyers and sellers. It was going nowhere fast. I was losing money every single month, MLS fees, this fee, that fee, gas money, losing time. So I was like, why not focus on the renters? Because everybody told me not to do it. And you've probably heard this too, right? Mm-hmm. How many times have you heard from other agents, do not touch renters, it's a waste of your time, it's basically taboo in this industry. So I wanted to, again, prove everybody wrong. So in November of 2019, I set out to do my first rental deal. I didn't know what I was doing. I have a YouTube channel now. I show agents how to do this, but I didn't have that back then. Back then, it was a brand new thing to me that I had to create out of necessity. My first deal ever was in December of 2019, right before Christmas. I had this lovely family of 5, husband, wife, 3 children. They had 500 credit, struggling, could not find a house. I did not want them to be homeless for Christmas Eve. I found them a property. I must have done 10 showings, spent at least a dozen hours on this, only made an $800 commission. To me, that wasn't a negative. A lot of agents say, wow, you just spent 10, 15 hours on an $800 commission. What are you doing? I saw that as an opportunity to grow and learn. How can I hone these skills in to make a bigger commission and take less time doing it? 2 years later, I got it down to 2 hours per client, per rental deal that I'm doing, and $2,000 average commission. Now, that's here in South Florida. It's going to vary across the country, but I'll explain in a second why it doesn't matter if an agent is making $100 a rental, $300, $500. You can make 6 figures no matter where you are in the entire United States right now by doing rentals and turning rentals into buyers, because that's another big component as well. My first year of real estate, after closing this deal, I had generated about $80,000 in commission, closing about 50 deals, but 6 of those were house sales. That's the crazy part. Did about 44 rentals and 6 house sales, converted 6 active renters into buyers. And remember, I had no clue I was a brand new agent. I had no clue on earth what I was doing. I had 0 network, no sphere of influence, and I was in a brand new state. Yet I basically capped with EXP my first year, which was awesome. Second year of real estate, I said, you know what? I'm on to something. This is a strategy that nobody has ever thought about before. It's so underutilized. There's no competition from other agents. I ended up closing 170 deals. After 1 year in the business, I made about $250,000 in commission. I became an icon agent almost immediately after getting into real estate, which is incredible to think about, but it gets even better. My third year, I was like, you know what? Let me dial this in. Let me see how far I can push this. We had conversations back then. I was working 12 hours a day. It wasn't necessarily easy to do. Doing rentals, very simple. Very, very simple to do a rental deal. Like I said, 2 hours, I'm making $2,000 commission, making $1,000 an hour. The problem is, if you want to do bulk volume, if you want to close 20, 30 deals a month, because that's what I did my third year. I closed 250 deals, I think that year I was the number 3 ranked agent in the world with EXP by deals done. Then I made about $510,000 from working with renters. And obviously I converted some renters into buyers as well, probably about 10 renters that I converted to buyers.
And the conversions, are they while you were through the rental process or the ones you put into rentals year 1 and 2?
Probably I didn't track that necessarily. I got everything on a spreadsheet. I can go back and look. Probably a mix of both, right? Because remember, my first year with no closed rentals, I still did 6. So it got a little bit better. But remember, this was 2022. So 2022, we were in the heat of, we were ending the pandemic, and we were peaking actually in June of 2022. That was the peak of the market, at least down in South Florida. So it was getting tough. We were getting 30 offers for some of these rental properties. When I was doing house sales, there'd be like 50 offers on a single property, which was like mind blowing. So even thinking back on it, I'm like, how the heck did I do 250 deals during that market, during the heat of the pandemic over there? But I did. And I'm telling you now, it's even easier now. Like, I have a significantly easier time doing these rental deals, turning renters into buyers right now, way easier than 2022, because if you think about it, there were about 4.5 million house sales last year. There were 45 million rentals. There's a 10-to-1 ratio of renters to buyers. Any agent that is focusing on the 10% of buyers and sellers when there's 1.5 million agents out there all fighting for the same 2 or 3 deals per year, that's why 71% of agents did 0 deals in 2024. That's why we're at a 90% failure rate right now. I truly feel like agents are not doing real estate correct. It goes renter, buyer, seller. 99% of agents, they're skipping the first stage of real estate. They're skipping the rental stage. They're going straight to buyer. They're going straight to seller. That's not how real estate should be done. I'm closing deals every single week. You feel good. You get fulfillment out of helping families out. That first family I helped out back in December of 2019, the mother and father I remember, this is going to choke me up. They were crying to me that night because nobody could help them get into a property. I did. Their children were running around screaming, "Mommy and Daddy, we found a home." Really, it chokes me up to think about this today. And I'm doing hundreds of these per year. Any agent that focuses on renters, they can do the exact same thing. They can replicate. I'm not special. I'm not unique. They can replicate what I've done. They're just doing the wrong things. Think about it. You ever play video games? Mm-hmm. Think about, playing Super Mario Brothers on hard mode. Do you think you would do that the first time you touch a game?
Not a good idea.
No, not a good idea. Renters are easy mode. Buyers, medium, getting harder. Listings, that's like expert mode. Why on earth, would you start doing a FISBO cold calls right out the gate? Why would you try to do an open house strategy or a mailer strategy or door knocking strategy when you have no clue what you're doing? That's why new realtors, I truly believe it. They're being misdirected by accident. The brokers, the team leaders, the mentors, they don't know any better. What they used to do real estate, maybe 10, 20 years ago, it used to work back then because we were in a different market. So any agent, we didn't have the same kind of competition. There wasn't 1.5 million realtors 20 years ago. So doing these kind of strategies for newer agents, it worked, but it doesn't work anymore. It's 2025. We literally have less homes being sold right now than the 2008 crash. It's been since almost 30 years, 1995. That's when this little few houses were being sold. And agents cannot learn the same way that was working 10, 15, 20 years ago. They can't do it. It's not working. I'm telling you, that's why so many agents, remember, I talk to thousands of agents across the country every single year. These agents are struggling right now. They cannot afford to pay their rent. They can't afford to pay their bills. And it's because of the fact that it's not a buyer's market. And they're being taught to work with buyers and sellers exclusively. They're skipping the rentals. I truly believe that if any agent were to just try to work with rentals, it's going to be tough at first because obviously you have to learn what you're doing. I do show agents how to do this on my YouTube channel so anybody can go on there, watch it, and absorb some of the knowledge. You'll close deals immediately, within weeks. I've had agents reach out to me and say, Andy, I was about to get a 9-to-5 job. I was about to quit real estate. It's not working for me. I can't pay my bills. I saw one of your YouTube videos on your rental strategy. I closed the deal in my next week. I can pay my rent this month now. That's what's happening across the country right now.
I think the most interesting thing that you've talked about to me is the math problem. So the average buyer, according to NAR, takes 87 hours. 87 hours between meeting the customer, putting them in your car, attending all the inspections, all the follow-up, the paperwork, for an average commission of probably $10,000 across the United States.
Yeah.
When you say 87 divided by, that's a different math problem. Walk us through maybe where it starts for you, right? Because it sounds like that first person took tens of hours, not 87, but probably a dozen or so. And you've got it down to, you said 2 hours. So walk us through, because again, I think people might hear commission of $2,000 versus, hey, if I do a sale, it's $10,000 or $15,000 or $20,000, depending on the market you're in. But I think people don't think of it in time spent, right? Like, walk us through some of your funnels. Like, a lead comes in on a Monday. How long is it till that becomes a monetization based on the system you've built? Because that's what I think is fascinating about what you've done.
Yeah, that's a great point. Renters need to move immediately. The average renter needs to move in 24 days, according to apartments.com. So
say that again. That's really important.
About 24 days, the average renter, and they're only seeing about 2 or 3 houses, the average renter, which is bananas. Me personally, I can show 0 homes. I got strategies now where I'm doing 0 showings. I can get a renter lead, right? Convert that lead into a client on a Monday. I could have that deal under contract and closed 24 hours later. That's been my best ever, about 24 hours from getting the lead. That's not typical, obviously.
Yeah, what does typical look like?
I would say on average, it's about a week or so from getting that lead, maybe 5, 6, 7 days from the time you talk to that lead. Because remember, you have to convince them to work with you. You got to convince them to become a client of yours. Then you got to convert that client into a closed deal. So there's a lot that goes into doing that. It's a very simple strategy, which I'm going to talk about in a second. I'll explain my entire strategy of exactly how to generate these leads every day for free, by the way, 100% free. You don't have to spend $1 in ad spend, marketing, nothing. Here's the crazy part, right? You can then take these tenants, okay? You can get them into a rental property. 1 year later, 2 years later, whenever the market switches back to a buyer's market, you can convert 30% of them into closed buyers. Do the math on this, right? Say you close 300 rentals over the next 2 years, right? Which is not that hard. It's about 10 rentals per month. Remember, my best month, 30 rentals. I would average closing mid-20 rentals every single month. If you have 300 closed renters and you convert 30% of them into buyers, what's the math on that?
It's good money.
90 sales per year. That's $900,000 in commission, 2 or 3 years. You could do this as a brand new agent. So I always like to say, you can make, if you're like me, $500,000 a year working with renters, right? If you close a few hundred deals, convert some into buyers. Or if you're like a regular agent that doesn't, work 12 hours a day, you could still make 100, 200, 300 grand per year right now in this market by working with renters. And I'll explain the strategy in a second, but that's not the real money. The real money is going to come in 2 or 3 years when you convert 30% of your closed renters into buyers. You can literally become a millionaire very shortly. You don't have to do real estate for 10 or 20 years. That's a thing of the past. Maybe agents, used to have to grind and spend sleepless nights and not cash commission checks for 6 months, 9 months. That has all but disappeared. With this rental system that I'm going to break down, you can close your first deal in your next 7 days.
Shoot, go.
Okay. So I have 3 strategies that I use. I've perfected my MLS strategy the most, then my apartment strategy, and then getting rental listings. Now, you'll see how rental listings kind of feeds back into the first 2 strategies. I'll explain that in a second. My MLS strategy, you're going to take rental listings from your MLS. You're going to get permission to advertise these properties from the listing agent, of course. Now, some markets like, I believe, Texas, New York, South Florida, we have something called Any Broker Advertise in our MLS. So you actually get inherent permission. You don't even have to ask for permission technically. But it's always good practice to ask for permission because you're advertising another agent's listing. So I always ask for permission from a listing agent. Can I advertise your property on, let's just say, Facebook Marketplace, for example? That's a basic free platform to use to advertise these rental listings to get clients coming in. I have about 20 other platforms and ways to do this, but I want to use that as an example because you can literally do it with $0 in ad spend, like I mentioned before. Think about it from this perspective. If you get a listing and you put it on the MLS, it syndicates out to all the sites out there, you're going to get a bunch of leads coming in for that listing, right? You don't have to get these listings yourself. You just have to advertise them with permission from other agents. You'll still get the leads coming in. You can have hundreds of these listings advertised on Facebook Marketplace. If you do this correctly, you can have, in the peak of my heyday, I was getting in 200 free leads per day. That's 6,000 leads a month. That's mass volume. That's the only way that you can turn renters into buyers right now. You need volume because, as we talked about before, only 10% of the market is actually buying homes. Once these buyers, if you're doing a traditional strategy of getting 20 leads a month, let's say like a premier strategy or something, then once they see what they're going to get qualified for, they're going to back out because the mortgage rates are high. We're 40% overinflated. Our inventory is still lower than pre-pandemic. They can't afford what they want right now. A $500,000 house is not what it used to be. So you lose a lot of people. But when you're doing this kind of volume, getting that kind of leads, talking to this many people, that doesn't happen. You're going to lose people, but you'll still get people. That's why you can still convert one renter into a buyer every single month doing this strategy. And that's an extra 10 grand. And it doesn't matter where you are. You could make $300 commission for a rental transaction. I charge an admin fee, a transaction fee. I call it an EXP transaction fee, $300 to the tenant. So even if the landlord were to pay me $300, I just made $600. What you said before about time, if I'm spending, let's say, 2 hours on this rental transaction and I'm making $600, how much am I making per hour?
Yeah.
$300 an hour. Now, I'm fortunate. I'm in South Florida. I make half a month's rent commission. So I'm making about $1,700. I charge a $300 transaction fee. I make $2,000 for 2 hours of work. I'm making $1,000 an hour. Tell me another profession where you don't have to go to school for 15 years to make $1,000 an hour. It does not exist on this planet. So once you get permission to advertise this rental property, you're going to get leads flooding in from Facebook Marketplace, if done correctly, right? You take these leads and you convert them into clients of yours. We don't have the time for me to explain how to actually do that. Convert them into clients of yours. I have two strategies from there. I can either show them the property that they initially reached out about, or I can give them suggestions on other properties that they might like in addition to that initial property. So the ultimate goal is to get that first property rented out. But if you get 20 leads for one rental property, 123 Main Street, only one of them is getting in. 19 of those leads, they cannot get into that house. You need to have backup options. So you set them up on your MLS. This way, that's an automatic CRM. They're getting emailed a new listing the second it hits the market. They think you're a superstar at this point. You get these leads to convert into clients of yours. You figure out how to keep them loyal to you, and that does take a little bit of practice. You'll be able to close that lead into a rental property. Sometimes you'll be able to convert them into a buyer. If done correctly, you can convince them to buy a home if it makes financial sense for them. We don't want to push them into doing anything they don't want to do. The ultimate goal is to help people. You want to make sure you're getting the client, the tenants, exactly what they want. You don't want to force them into any situation they don't want to be in. So your goal is just to facilitate, give them the information, give them the facts, be the expert, know the areas. Once you do that, they're going to be loyal to you. They're going to make sure that they're going to use you for buying a house. They're going to use you to rent that property or another property. They're going to refer you to their family and friends. Now, once you're actually getting these leads to turn into clients, you're going to put in offers, okay? So once you show the property, or if you're like me, I do advanced strategies where I put in pre-offers, right? I'll do a credit background eviction report, rental application, proofing of driver's license, real quick, write up a contract to lease, send it over to the listing agent, make sure that they get pre-approved first, right? It's kind of like getting a pre-approval for a mortgage. Once the landlord gives the thumbs up, Then I'll take them to the property, right? Listing agent's well aware of this. We're on the same page here at this point. But guess what? It takes about 30 minutes to drive to a property. If I can send out 5 pre-offers and this tenant can get accepted to 2 of them, I just saved 3 showings that I don't need to do now, and they don't need to do. I save my time. I save the tenant's time. It's a genius strategy. That's how I was closing 20 to 30 deals a month, among hundreds of other things. But that was a big trick of how I was able to save time, because if you're spending too much time doing tasks that are not making you money per hour, you've lost the battle. You've already lost. You need that time to help more families. And the consequence of helping families is commission checks. You're closing deals. So think about it from this perspective, right? You're advertising a rental listing with permission. You're getting a lead to come in for that property. You're making sure that if they don't fit that property's qualifications, or they like another property better, they use you to go and get that new property. You try to convert them into a buyer if it makes financial sense for them. Then you can either show them the properties, or you can do this pre-offer advanced strategy, like I like to call it. Then once you do that, offer gets accepted. All you're doing from there is writing up a lease agreement. Typically, the listing agent does that. Takes 2 minutes to get that signed. You're putting 1 month's rent into escrow. That's it. Then, if there's an HOA, have the tenant apply to the HOA. Very simple, very, very easy. Then you do the final walkthrough. That's it. You go to the final walkthrough. You make sure the tenant brings last month's rent and security deposit. The tenant gets their keys. You get your commission check. That whole process there, that's 2 hours of work. If done correctly, I've done it in an hour before. If I don't have to do any showings, I've done it. You could pay a showing agent $20 to go and show a property. And at that point, you're talking an hour of work to make $2,000. That's why I said in the beginning, agents are doing this all wrong. They're doing real estate wrong. It should always, no matter what. I don't care if you've been doing this for 20 years. I don't care if you've been doing this for 20 days. It should go renter, buyer, seller. That's that. You're setting up a long-term business at this point, because what happens after you close that rental deal, you cash that commission check, you stay in touch with them, right? You stay top of mind for the next year. They end up buying a house with you. Remember I said before about 30% of your closed renters will turn to buyers? From there, they will if you 369, a weekly constant contact, birthdays, holidays. If you follow that strategy, they will buy a house with you 30% of the time, because 50% of tenants eventually buy a home. You only need to capture 30% of them. And that's where you make the big money in real estate very, very quickly. So that's MLS properties. I also have apartment complexes, right? Remember, there's 3 parts to this. Mm-hmm. So you could do that exclusively. That's the majority of what I do, what I just explained, MLS properties, right? You could also do apartment complexes. It's called apartment locating. It's essentially very similar to that, but instead of getting permission to advertise rental listings off the MLS, you're getting permission to advertise apartment complexes from apartments.com, various sites like that, right? You can do reels, put it on Instagram, again, 100% for free. You can put it on Marketplace. You could do both. This way, you can take them to that apartment complex. You'll have a list of other apartment complexes that they qualify for or maybe like better. You'll show 1 or 2 apartment complexes. And I swear to you, this is the easiest money. This is even easier than the MLS strategy. Maybe you'll spend an hour on each client doing this, because you don't do any paperwork after that. You take them to an apartment complex. The apartment complex, the leasing manager does everything for you. All you do is tag along for the showing. Afterwards, they apply to the apartment complex on the apartment's website. You don't have to do the lease agreement. You don't have to do the deposit. You don't have to do the final walkthrough. Your job is done after that showing. And they'll pay you a commission depending on the apartment complex. Some of them give you a full month's rent. If it's a $3,000 apartment, you'll make $3,000 for an hour of work. Could be $500, could be $1,000, could be half a month's rent. Really situational based on the apartment complex. So that's the apartment complex strategy that I also utilize. Then you could also get rental listings. What agents are failing to realize right now, if you're calling FSBOs, for sale by owners, it doesn't work at all. There's 50 other agents that have called that FSBO before you. It's a losing battle. I cannot stress this enough. Nobody is calling for rent by owner. Nobody. You will be one of maybe 5 people a week calling a for rent by owner. And that's probably being generous. If you call for rent by owners and convince them to give you that rental listing, you'll get the full month's rent commission. I don't care where you are in the whole country. The worst that you'll get is half a month's rent commission. That's the worst. Half a month's rent commission up to a full month's rent commission if you get both sides. This is getting tenant leads as well. Remember my MLS strategy. Now you're getting the actual listing itself. So you're going to get the full month's rent commission. Plus when you post it, it'll syndicate to all the sites. You'll put it on Marketplace, et cetera. Then you'll start getting leads flooded in. So you can then go back and use those leads for the MLS strategy. So not only do you get the rental listing, the commission from that, you'll then get dozens, sometimes hundreds of leads from that rental listing. It kills two birds with one stone. So there are three main strategies on how to work with renters. I haven't heard or figured out any other ones. Those are the three that I've mastered, I focused on. Doing so, I'm making over $500,000 a year. And the crazy part is I'm working less and less every single year to do this. I was working 12 hours a day, in my third year of doing this. And nowadays I'm working like an hour a day, half an hour a day, 2 hours a day, maybe. It's because we're in a rentals market, because we have a 10-to-1 ratio of renters to buyers, because just in my MLS alone in South Florida, we have 28,000 active rentals plus 30,000 apartment complexes plus 10,000 for rent by owners. There's an overabundance of inventory for rentals. There's no agents doing this. No, none. Maybe if I'm being generous, we have 200,000 agents in Florida. Maybe 100 agents are doing this in the entire state. Maybe. You don't have competition. Can I say this in 5 years from now? Maybe not. If enough agents catch on and realize that this is the way you're supposed to be doing real estate, I might not be able to claim that you could go and make a boatload of money in your next 30 days. But right now, heck yes, you could. Very, very easily. I have a channel that I just created for real estate agents where I talk about these strategies. I break it down in depth, and I really try to make agents understand that this rental strategy, all three strategies that I'm doing, can be done by them, not just me. I've taught hundreds of agents.
I tell you so honestly, your strategy gave me the ability to make the money I needed to make. In just a few short months, I went from making $0 to making $25,000.
Part-time, I do about like 5 to 6 deals a month.
So what's your profit after 4 months?
So it'll be 39,000 or so.
In 2 weeks of signing up, I closed 6 deals and I made $10,000 in net commission.
If you want all of my actual responses and scripts, I create a program just to teach my rental strategy. So check out the link in the description. It's richardrantals.com. Any agent can do this. At this point, I've realized the only limitation is up here. If an agent believes that they're capable of helping a family out, they can copy exactly what I've done.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending some time and sharing such powerful strategies. And it's always great to talk to you, Andy.
Well, Leo, thank you so much.